Imagine waking up one morning and being told, you are free. No land, no money, no last name that belonged to you. No map, no shoes, no plan. Just free. Now what? On January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. 2 more years of brutal war followed, and when the guns finally fell silent in April 1865, 4 million black men, women, and children stood at the edge of a brand new world. One freedman named Houston Hartsfield Holloway wrote something that still echoes through history. For we colored people did not know how to be free, and the white people did not know how to have a free colored person about them. Think about that. 250 years of slavery. And now, in a single moment, everything was supposed to be different. It wasn't. Not even close. In March of 1865, the United States government created something called the Freedmen's Bureau. Its mission? To catch 4 million people who had just been dropped off a cliff. The Bureau handed out food, clothing, medicine. It helped legally register marriages that slavery had never allowed black couples to make official. It helped soldiers collect the wages they'd been cheated out of. And most powerfully, it opened schools. Here's something that should stop you cold. Before the Civil War, it was illegal to teach enslaved people to read. Illegal. You could be arrested, or worse, for picking up a book. But now, teachers poured into the South, black and white, from the North and South, and the people showed up to learn. Grandparents, parents, children, all in the same classroom, all hungry for the same thing: knowledge, power, the ability to read their own freedom papers. By the turn of the century, just 35 years after slavery, the majority of black Americans could read and write. That is not a statistic. That is a miracle forged by human will. But here's where the story gets darker. There was a promise. You may have heard of it. 40 acres and a mule. General Sherman issued an order in 1865. Land seized from Confederate plantations would be distributed to freed black families. 40 acres, a fresh start, a foundation. Then President Andrew Johnson, a man who openly despised black equality, reversed it. Every single acre, taken back, returned to the very people who had enslaved them. 4 million people, no land, no capital, no safety net, and a nation that had just decided officially that it didn't owe them anything. The ink on the Emancipation Proclamation wasn't even dry before Southern states started fighting back. They couldn't call it slavery anymore, so they called it something else. They called it the law. The Black Codes were a series of laws passed across the South designed to do one thing: return black people to bondage without using the word slave. In Mississippi, freed black people had to carry papers proving they had a job. No papers? Arrested for vagrancy. Can't pay the fine? The sheriff could literally hire you out to a white employer to work off the debt. One scholar called it, plainly, slavery by another name. They couldn't vote, couldn't serve on juries, couldn't testify against a white person in court, couldn't own certain property, couldn't move freely. And if you tried to resist, groups like the Ku Klux Klan, founded in 1865, the very year slavery ended, were waiting. With fire, with ropes, with terror. Between 1882 and 1951, the Tuskegee Institute recorded over 3,400 black Americans who were lynched. That's documented. Historians believe the real number is far higher. And here is the part that should shatter you. In 1819 alone, the peak year, at least 161 black people were lynched. That is more than 3 people every single week. And almost none of the killers were ever punished. And yet, And yet, this is the part of the story that never gets told loudly enough. Because even in the middle of terror, even while the system was designed to grind them into dust, Black Americans were building. During Reconstruction, the window of federal protection that lasted from 1865 to 1877, Black men voted in massive numbers. They ran for office. They won. More than 600 Black men served in state legislatures across the South. 2 Black senators were elected to the United States Congress, Hiram Revels and Blanche Bruce, both from Mississippi. Black delegates helped write new state constitutions. They pushed for and won the South's very first public school systems. They fought for equal rights on public transportation. They built hospitals and charitable institutions. For a brief, blazing moment, Black Americans were remaking America. Then 1877 came. Federal troops were pulled from the South. The experiment called Reconstruction ended, and the backlash was swift, brutal, organized, and Jim Crow laws swept across every southern state. Poll taxes, literacy tests designed to fail, violence at the polls. Black politicians were removed, voted out through fraud, threatened into silence. But here is what the oppressors never counted on. You cannot uneducate a people who have tasted knowledge. You cannot unbuild a community that has learned to build. Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1906. A man named O.W. Gurley arrived in a stretch of land in North Tulsa and purchased 40 acres of land with one vision: a community built by Black people, for Black people. He opened a grocery store, then a boarding house, then a Masonic lodge, then an employment agency. And he did something radical. He loaned money to other Black entrepreneurs who wanted to build. Word spread. People came. A man named J.B. Stratford arrived born into slavery in Kentucky, now a lawyer and businessman. He built the finest hotel in all of Tulsa, a 55-room luxury establishment, the largest Black-owned hotel in the entire country. Simon Barry created an entire transportation network, car rides, a bus line. He even chartered private planes to fly wealthy oilmen into Tulsa. By 1921, the Greenwood District had 108 Black-owned businesses, 15 doctors, dentists, lawyers, and real estate offices, luxury shops, movie theaters, restaurants, and nightclubs, 2 Black-owned newspapers, a high school where students studied Latin, physics, and bookkeeping. Booker T. Washington visited and was so stunned by what he saw that he called it the Negro Wall Street of America, a district of 10,000 people, mostly descendants of enslaved people, some of them born into bondage themselves, building an empire in the shadow of Jim Crow, against every law that was meant to stop them. May 31st, 1921. A white mob gathered, armed, organized, furious at what Black people had dared to achieve. In 18 hours, 35 square blocks burned to the ground. An estimated 300 Black Americans killed. 1,000 homes destroyed. 10,000 people left homeless. 190 businesses gone. No insurance paid out. No perpetrators prosecuted. The city tried to rezone the land to prevent rebuilding. They rebuilt anyway. Within 10 years, the Greenwood District rose from the ashes. Same families, same spirit, same refusal to be erased. Between 1910 and 1970, 5 million Black Americans did something extraordinary. They left. They packed everything they owned, sometimes it fit in a single bag, and they boarded trains headed north, west, anywhere but here. They were fleeing lynchings, sharecropping, humiliation, but they were also chasing something. A factory wage in the north was 3 times what black workers could earn in the southern fields. 3 times. They poured into Chicago, Detroit, New York, Philadelphia, Los Angeles. And with them, they brought their music, their food, their faith, their fire. The Great Migration didn't just change where black people lived, it changed America. Because when black people arrived in Harlem, New York, something erupted. We call it the Harlem Renaissance. Langston Hughes wrote poetry that made America see itself clearly for the first time. Zora Neale Hurston told stories that had never been told in any book. Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong invented sounds the world had never heard. Josephine Baker became the most celebrated performer in Europe. W.E.B. Du Bois gave the world a philosophical framework to understand race, power, and humanity. The Harlem Renaissance didn't just celebrate black culture. It challenged every racist lie that had been used to justify slavery and segregation. And it lit the fuse that would eventually become the Civil Rights Movement. Let's talk about the people who refused to accept the story being written for them. Ida B. Wells, a woman born into slavery in 1862, became the most fearless anti-lynching journalist in American history. She documented atrocities, named names, shamed a nation. Death threats didn't stop her. Mobs didn't stop her. Nothing stopped her. Booker T. Washington, born enslaved, freed at 9 years old, built the Tuskegee Institute from the ground up and trained an entire generation of black professionals. Jesse Owens, in 1936, walked into Adolf Hitler's Germany and won 4 gold medals at the Berlin Olympics. The man who wanted to prove black people were inferior had to watch a black man become the greatest athlete in the world. The Tuskegee Airmen, black fighter pilots in World War II, were told they couldn't fly, told they weren't capable, told to stay out. They flew 1,578 combat missions and never lost a bomber they were protecting. Not once. Harriet Tubman, who had already freed herself from slavery, went back 13 times into the jaws of the plantation to free others. She never lost a single person on the Underground Railroad. She later served as a spy and military strategist for the Union Army during the Civil War, leading an armed raid that freed over 70 enslaved people in a single night. This was a woman who was never supposed to be able to read, never supposed to own a gun, never supposed to be free. In 1865, 4 million people had nothing. By 1900, just 35 years later, the majority could read and write. They had built churches, schools, banks, and newspapers. They had sent men to the United States Congress. By the 1920s, they had built Black Wall Street, sparked the Harlem Renaissance, created jazz, blues, and gospel music that became the heartbeat of modern culture. By the 1940s, they were fighting for a country that still didn't fully claim them, and fighting with a distinction that shamed every argument used to keep them out. By the 1950s and 60s, they led a civil rights movement that rewrote American law. Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., John Lewis, Fannie Lou Hamer. Ordinary people who decided that enough was enough. Historically, black colleges and universities, HBCUs, produced some of the greatest minds America has ever seen. Doctors, scientists, lawyers, artists, leaders. Think about what it took. Every step of this journey was taken with the weight of the past on their shoulders and a wall of resistance in front of them. And they kept walking. They walked, and they built, and they created, and they fought. Not just for themselves, but for every generation that would come after. This story, the real story, is not just a story of pain. It is a story of the most extraordinary resilience in human history. People who were stripped of everything, their names, their languages, their families, their freedom, and who chose again and again to rebuild, to educate, to create, to demand, to love, to endure. The next time someone asks what black people have achieved, remember this: they achieved it all, starting from zero, with the whole world trying to stop them. If this story moved, you share it, because the truth deserves to be heard as loudly as the lies that tried to bury it. Like, subscribe, and remember, history belongs to those who refuse to forget it. The next story is even more shocking. Subscribe so you don't miss it.